of 2006. Could you have the roll call, City Clerk?
With the exception of council members Rosansky and Nichols, all council members are present.
I think both of them will be here in a minute or two. Clarifications of items on the consent calendar. Mr. Curry, you want to start off on that?
Just a question on the item relative to helping to pave the parking lot at Corona Del Mar High School. Is that a discretionary act, or do we have some actual legal financial responsibility for that?
It isn't a legal responsibility for doing that. It was a part of trying to come up with a better solution than we had as far as safe crossings, pedestrian, also improved circulation in that area. So we had money set aside for a traffic signal, and we used that money for these purposes.
Thank you. Any other items you wish to? Mr. Selich.
Item number 12, are we going to do that before we vote on the Newport Coast contract?
Newport Coast Community Center and Santa Ana Heights.
On the construction contract, are we going to award the construction manager?
Steve, can that be bifurcated? I mean, if the
Yes.
Newport Coast project does not go forward, we can still...
The contract's set up so we can essentially award a reduced amount at this point, and then if the other project comes back, we'll get the credit and we'll go back to the original amount.
Okay.
On the second page, it shows the price split if you do it separately as opposed to...
Well, I saw the price split, I just didn't realize whether we were absolutely committing to that or not. Thank you.
Mr. Rosansky.
Nothing, thank you.
Councilmember Daigle.
Nothing to pull, but I think the repaving was better received from our community than that traffic signal would have been, so I think it was good.
On item 16, I asked the Public Works Director for a map today to just show us what is actually occurring. So did you bring one?
I thought it was in my binder. I'll have to run back over and get it for you.
Well, I'd like to have that before we vote on it tonight. So
You'll
I'd like
have
to
it.
see I'd like to physically know what's occurring. And all we're doing right now is just providing a money amount, while Councilmember Daigle may know what we're doing, the rest of us really don't.
It's already done. This is a repayment.
Well, I'd like to see what was done then.
Okay.
It's done and it's working well.
It's working very well.
Does the staff have anything that they'd like to bring up?
No.
On that one item related to B-17, as we go through, let's see, that's going to be agenda item, what is that?
Are you talking about item 15?
Is that 15?
Well, I'm not sure. That's the...
18, okay. Oh, we can do that when we discuss the item. Okay, the next item that we have is the Centennial Commemorative Project at McFadden Square. Who's going to do that presentation for us?
Marie Knight.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the council. This afternoon, we've brought a project to you for input and for some direction. Since the beginning of the Centennial Project, as we've been accumulating supporters, sponsors, and donors to the project, the Sponsorship Development Committee has been very adamant about needing a way to permanently recognize our donors. Discussions began over a year ago as to where we might do something like this and what it might look like. We quickly centered on the McFadden Square area because, as you all know, that's where Newport Beach began. And about that time, I had some preliminary meetings with Kerwin Rockefeller, who's the chair of the Arts Commission, to explore some sort of a urban beautification project in that area that could help us accomplish this. From there, a series of meetings and discussions took place, and different presentations and different concept ideas have been battered around, and it's brought us to what you'll see today. Originally, we were looking at doing a small project in the center of the square But upon bringing this forward in different forums for some input, we were also asked to expand that project so that if the council so choose, we could carry the smaller project throughout the entire square and make it a little more consistent. I offer this as an explanation so that you realize why you are going to see a concept tonight that is in 2 phases. The steering committee for the Centennial likes this concept. They've embraced this concept. They also feel, though, that it would stand alone as a first phase very well without having to expand to the second phase, but like the second phase and think that that would be a nice addition to the area. As I have said, this is a concept. This is not a plan that is completely ironed out and detailed. You will hear from Ray Price with Peridian International tonight. They have been so generous to come on board and to do a lot of this work for us as to date on a pro bono basis. And we did not want to ask them to do too much more until we had some direction from you as to if you liked the proposal, what we should move forward with, and in what manner. And I would also say that we are willing to entertain ideas of ramping the concept up, scaling it back. We're really here for input and to see what you do or do not like or your thoughts on the project. As I said, I've been working very closely with Kerwin Rockefeller for the past year, so I'd like to have him talk to you a little bit about our process, the discussions that have taken place, and then he will introduce Ray Price, who will make our presentation this evening.
Welcome, Kerwin.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and ladies and gentlemen of City Council. I'm Kerwin Rockefeller. I'm the chairman of the Newport Beach Arts Commission, and what Marie says is true. Our first conversation actually took place March of last year, March of 2005, when Marie approached me and a few other members of the Arts Commission to just get some ideas rolling about how we might, as the Arts Commission, assist in an aesthetic process way for a donor recognition project for the Centennial here. So the Arts Commission, first of all, went directly to City Council Policy I-9, and it lays out very succinctly a process and steps in which we wanted to follow and do our due diligence so that we knew that we were following the process that's already been approved by City Council. The goal, again, was to create a donor recognition project. And it's funny how things kind of happen when you have a creative project like this. There's a lot of ideas, there's brainstormings, there are concepts, and if you'll pardon the phrase, nothing here you'll see tonight is set in stone. It is truly a concept, and it's the first time that we've been able to bring this concept to City Council members as well as to the public. Up until this point in time, we really haven't felt ready to share it with the general population of Newport Beach. We've been doing our process here. Over the course of the last year and 1 month, we have presented to the Centennial Committee, actually twice, in October of 2005 and April of 2006. We also presented to the Heritage Subcommittee in December of 2005 and various meetings along the way. As Marie said, it's very correct. What you'll be seeing here tonight is Phase 1 and a Phase 2. Literally, what began as an idea of a 3-foot wall in McFadden Square in front of a fire hydrant has now grown with many people's input into a Phase 1 donor recognition project and a Phase 2. So again, what you're seeing tonight is a concept, it's an idea, and we welcome your input as well as members of the community to have input as well. Peridian International came on board in August of 2005 after my approaching several other organizations. Peridian has been in Newport Beach, Corona Del Mar since 1970. They are a part of our community. They are a part of our family here. They have done pro bono work for the city in the past, as early as the 1970s with Cliff View Park on Cliff Drive, and all the way up to the present with Corona Del Mar Meridians. They have a long history of working with the city. It's my pleasure to introduce Ray Price.
Good afternoon. My name is Ray Price. I'm principal with Peridian International, and Tolaf Larson's is here to assist me, one of my associates. I guess I should start by saying that we were approached a little over a year ago by one of your members of the Art Commission that works with Kerwin, Jerry Allison, who's an architect here with Wimberley, Allison, Tong, and Gu, very fine architects that do a lot of resorts that we've worked with in the past. And he came to us and said, we'd like to have you work on this project. And he explained what it was. And finally, we said, well, we'll make you an offer you can't refuse. So that's how we got started on this project. But it's been an enjoyable project so far, and we hope to see it completed in the future. With that, I'd like to start with a PowerPoint presentation here. We're going to start with Phase 1, which was the original charge that we had, and that was to come up with an idea of a piece of a combination of public art as well as something that commemorates the timeline of the city of Newport Beach. And we picked this slide because it kind of says it all. It's kind of like, if you drop a pebble in a pond and the waves go, it's kind of how Newport Beach started. It started at McFadden Square, and then it ripple effect and became the city that it is today. To locate, you can see, and you all know where McFadden Square is, but we thought we would take this pictorial and kind of give you an idea of how it relates to some of the surrounding areas that you have. The pier, obviously the square itself. Over across the street, we understand there's some potential new development to occur across there, and we think this whole concept can be expanded to outside areas as well as McFadden Plaza. Phase 1, the existing conditions. This shows basically the whole McFadden Square. The center area in the yellow tone in the center is what we call Phase 1. We're showing the basic buildings in the kind of brown color and the circulation, both the emergency access to the pier, the doryman's access to the doryman area, and the boardwalk that goes through the square. So you can see how this little piece of ground sits in the center of a very, very active space. Okay. So we pull up the phase 1 area, which is the monument area itself, and you can see what's existing there is some planters with some palm trees, some banding of a tile, and some concrete inserts. And that's the area that we focused on originally. These are some photos of the site. You can see in the left-hand corner as you approach from the parking lot, the kiosk and the lifeguard station in the rear and the pier. The right is a shot that's kind of looking over from by the Charlie's Chili, kind of looking out. The bottom one area is the area of the doryman's approach. And then the center slide is kind of looking again from towards the pier. Okay, so this is the design concept 1 again area. We started with the idea of creating a labyrinth for the timeline itself. It's kind of an element that is that starts like a maze, and you can start at the origin and just kind of walk your way around, if you will, the various dates and the various significant times of the development of Newport Beach. These are examples of labyrinths that have been elsewhere, and we think it not only will it represent well what the message we're trying to put across today, but also can be expanded as time goes on, and we can see adding to it as time goes on and events happen in the future.
That's a lot of centennial moments.
Yeah, there are.
It's true.
Hopefully there'll be many, many
Be
more.
able to give one.
We felt there was needed to be a focus in the center of the plaza, and we came up with the idea of again, kind of a sphere that could be, we could retain a local artist to help us with, and to create this kind of sphere that has on it engraved kind of all the things that happen in Newport Beach, all the activities from the pavilion to, people sailing to whatever, and kind of just as the essence of what Newport Beach is all about. So this is Phase 1 design as it's implemented into the overall existing plaza. The center gray area you can see is the Phase 1 Centennial area.
You might point out what you've changed. I guess maybe your next one you're going to do that, aren't you?
Yeah,
from what's
basically,
there today.
yeah, basically what you'll see here, the line work on the outside, you see the lines with the kind of squares and the palm trees, that's all existing. And so what we're doing is taking this feature and plugging it into the center and leaving all the existing around. So this element can actually be put into the existing area very easily and still be a standalone element.
And Ray, what would that color be then? Or-
Well, we'll get into the materials, but basically, let me go through it for you. The center, obviously, is the globe and the element. The light tan of the labyrinth is we envision that to be out of granite, and granite pieces that engrave the various timeline items on it. And that floats within other granite kind of pavers. The outside textured ring is an area of just granite pavers to then kind of frame this labyrinth. And then there's a band of granite with the 4 darkened areas are benches. And the benches are for the major donors to have bronze plaques on them. And then we see all of those plaques identical, nothing different, that gives the recognition of the donors. The outside ring, where the benches sit, and we can go to that slide, it starts to show you, if you blow up that area, you have the labyrinth event notified on the left, the granite pavers that you walk around, and then the outer ring will have just the names of the other donors, not necessarily the major donors, but other donors. And that would be set in granite also. So we have the major donors who are on the vertical surface of the benches, and we have the other donors in that outside ring, and then we have the timeline on the labyrinth in the center. These are the granite pavers that we were talking about in the outer area that framed the timeline. This is we put into a model what it would look like within the existing area from different angles, and you can see it. We have added some light poles. There are existing light poles there, and we've added them around this. But now you can see the vertical of the benches, and you can see the granite paving and the various rings. That's phase 1. Phase 2, fortunately, in part of our presentations and meetings, we met with Councilman Ridgway, who informed us about all the activities and things that are going on around McFadden's Plaza, McFadden Square, and suggested that we look at the surrounding areas as well and how we could maybe, instead of just focusing on the feature itself, expand on the whole plaza and how we could upgrade it. There's some things that have been wearing not very well, the tile paving, the raised planters with the palm trees. So we then took, you see this slide again, of phase 1 within the existing McFadden Plaza area. And this is the design where we can take the radial, again, this perpetuating waves or radial pattern that goes from the center of where the city and the community started out to encompass the rest of the plaza. And we could see this could actually expand out to other areas, even into the whole McFadden area there, including maybe some of the plazas across Balboa Boulevard and so forth. So what this does is it takes additional rings, and our concept here is to use interlocking pavers, concrete pavers, in the kind of mauve color with concrete rings that create this radial metaphor of expansion. The addition of a grove of palm trees with the major access to the pier down through the center for we can have benches and tables and chairs for shade, and also facilitate the existing kind of outdoor eating activities that go on outside Charlie's Chili and so forth in front of those businesses. We see an opportunity to have some benches and tables and so forth under that. So this shows phase 1 now with phase 2 with the new rings and the new pavers that are in the area between the rings. That's typically kind of so you know with the pavers. Right now you have on the what is it, the Portofino, or what's the hotel across the way?
The Doryman's Inn.
Doryman, thank you. Doryman all has red clay bricks and so forth. This tends to go with those colorations as well. Also, you could see that maybe in the future you could expand this in some of the walkways, if you like, where you've already put in brick bands and new concrete and so forth along some of the shops of the boardwalk. The trees that we're proposing in that grove of trees you saw are the Seaforthia elegans, the king palm. It's also been, this is in Corona Del Mar, but it's also been used at the pier, Balboa Pier, in the center area. That gives you a much more beachy, tropical look. And here are some additional shots. We are proposing to keep the kiosk that's there, maybe add some materials at the base that go with this design, but it would stay. And this shows you got people walking through the plaza. Another shot looking down, bird's eye. You see here we were putting tables and chairs and underneath the grove of palm trees. Okay. So that's the final phase 2 completed. And what we want to leave you with is kind of what we see it looking like at sunset, looking through the plaza. Any questions?
Thank you. Does council have questions
Thank you very much.
of Ray? I know we must be all speechless.
That's a springtime sunset, because in the summer, it's way over to the right.
You're right. I had an argument with my wife about that. I won $100 actually, where we picked 2 points of where the sunset is.
Yeah.
And in the summertime, it's clear over here. In the wintertime, it's just over the point of Catalina.
Correct.
And she said it was further over towards the Avalon. And I said, no, it's right there. Won $100 on that.
Ed, did you have something that you wanted to comment, or?
Oh, I just want to say that I think Pritian's done a great job on this, and I think that Kerwin and his group have done a good job in promoting this, and it's just really going to get down to, getting the donations to get Phase 1 underway, and I'm certainly supportive of that effort to get that going.
And I think that it hasn't been mentioned yet what the cost estimates are, the various different pieces, but on the last page of our staff report, it looks like the construction of the Phase 1 might cost, is estimated to cost at $491,000. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then if we were to do a Phase 2, that would be about another $1.4 million without contingency. So
And those are just very preliminary numbers, but
Right.
we know the costs of things have really been going sky high in California for construction costs. We also feel that there's some real logistics here about when this gets done and how it gets done. I have breakfast with my wife down at Charlie's Chili at least once a month, and it's amazing the activity there. So Phase 1 may be easier because you cordon off that area and you can still get around it because it's not in the main flow of traffic. But when you start to do Phase 2, you're going to have to come in and demolish part of it, keep part of it open, then let people use that, demolish the other. So there's a lot of logistics and construction that I think both in demolition and construction costs are going to be fairly high.
And you mentioned that you showed pavers, so there'd be concrete pavers nominally that are a reddish, not reddish, orangish.
Well, the only
burnt
reason
rust tone.
the only reason we picked that is to go with some of the other materials that have already been in place there. You've got the brick bands in the boardwalk and along all the businesses. You've got the red brick in front of the hotel. So it kind of goes in place, but it will tie it all together, we think.
Okay, now the labyrinth color, though, would be more on the grays?
Labyrinth would probably be in a reddish with the gray, the granite that has a red coloration to it with black, gray and reddish black. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it would be probably a flame granite, so it has a textured surface, and then it's engraved with the timeline activities on it. So it's not a smooth surface. It's not a rough surface, but it's not a smooth surface.
Todd?
Yeah, on pavers, they do have a terracotta charcoal mix.
Yes.
That would certainly complement that very well. And let me say, just generally, pavers in that area, skateboarders and rollerbladers come screaming through there now. One thing about pavers, you can, it'll slow them down, won't hurt them, and the coefficient of traction on both the granite and the pavers would be very safe. Quite candidly.
I didn't mention that, but that's one of the reasons. There's two reasons for the pavers. One is it will slow down the traffic as far as skateboarders, inline skaters, that type of, and even bicycles, because it's kind of, they can ride over it easy, but it's kind of stops you right there visually, and along with the signage. The other thing is that over time, there's going to be change. 20 years from now, 10 years from now, and the pavers you can pick up, do repairs, modifications, put them back down, blend them back in, and it's proven the test of time. And frankly, that's what we're after. We're after a very, very simplistic design here that will meet the test of time.
Yeah, I have to think back at the places that we went to in France and England where they're digging out the cobblestones one by one and setting them over to the side, saving them so they can put them right back into the hole.
And I know that in a recent trip I had to Moscow, that the Olive Red Square is a granite. It's about a 12 by 24 piece granite that they've been running tanks on for many, many years, and is able to withstand the time there. And it's been in place, and it's actually just butt jointed, just like you would interlocking pavers. So the granite material we think is a very lasting material. The pavers are lasting and can be repaired, and also they can be engraved.
Ed already said it, but I'll say it again, Ray. I want to thank you for your time and effort on this. I know it's you've been doing out of a labor of love, and we certainly appreciate it. We want you to keep bringing your wife down to Charlie's Chili. Maybe I'll buy you breakfast someday.
Okay. Well, thank you. It's enjoyable, and we look forward to hopefully this in the near future being built. So.
Well, as Kerwin said, this isn't the first project that Pritian's worked on. They came down and helped the bid with the median project in Corona Del Mar, and were a big help to us down there. So this is the first time they've stepped forward like this.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, now, I guess the thing that we're here for is this was brought to us to get our comments of where we want to go next.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Selledge?
Yeah, I'd like to hear from Kerwin on how he plans to raise the donations on this. Maybe you can give us a little insight, because $491,000 is a substantial amount of money to raise.
I'm sorry, I don't hear well. Could you repeat the question, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I said I'd like to hear how you plan to raise the money for the donations.
Well, first of all, the Arts Commission is not able to do fundraising. We are appointed by City Council merely in an advisory capacity from aesthetics and for cultural activities in the city, but I've had many conversations with Marie Knight about ad hoc fundraising committee. We talked about how we could go about doing that, but I really can't speak to that directly since the Arts Commission can't be involved in that part. I'll defer to Marie on that question. I'm not trying to sidestep it, but I would like to add just a couple of other comments as well, since I'm the academician from the university. I wanted to just point out a couple of things from an aesthetic standpoint and from a philosophical standpoint. When the Arts Commission started to roll this around in our minds, we knew that we wanted to encourage Paridian to be something that was timeless, elegant, sophisticated, very simple. When I began the conversations with them, we talked about archetypal forms and symbols. And what I'd like to say to you is that everything that you've seen today has had actually several months of thought and brainstorming and discussion about it. For instance, when we started off the presentation with the pebble into the water, that's where actually the idea of a sphere came from. A sphere is something that we live on. A planet is a sphere. It's a very universal archetypal form. We start life as a sphere, as an egg. And that's philosophically and metaphorically kind of then how that translates into the design and to the aesthetics of the project. A labyrinth is timeless. It has no beginning, it has no end, it can be added on to. So philosophically and aesthetically, again, that was chosen for very specific reasons. And we saw this as, when we looked at what the requirements were, primarily donor recognition, and yet looking at the entire beautification of the area there, it kind of seemed to grow, but again, based on some very sound philosophical ideas there. I'm sorry I can't answer the fundraising question except to say that the Arts Commission, we're really not able to do the fundraising, but I will turn that question over to Marie.
And I'd make an observation. If we're out doing fundraising, I want Kerwin there to make the presentation, too.
And maybe, Councilmember Curry, if I could ask you to do the lights one more time. As Ray talked about, the intent of Phase 1 is to be funded through private donations. The benches in this area would be where we recognize our current Centennial sponsors and donors. And then we would offer the opportunity, as you see in the lower right hand of the... Where'd the pointer come from suddenly? In the lower right hand, for people in town or who don't live in town but have a connection to Newport or want their names at McFadden Square for perpetuity, to buy, it's not buying a tile, but buying your name engraved into that area. And so Bernice Falstad, who is very successful in raising the funds for the Corona Del Mar Centennial Project, has offered to assist us as well. We have several other folks that have stepped up and said that they would work on an ad hoc committee to work on this project. So it would really be through those private name donations that we would hope to raise the funds. There would be also an opportunity for folks to put their names on the benches, but then that would take a greater donation. So that is our goal, is to do that. We, in working with Ray, know that we can get quite a few names down there at that project, and we think it would be very popular for people who have a connection to McFadden Square, and because of the materials used, it will be timeless. Your name will be down there for an awful long time, and we think that that's a great selling point.
And subtle.
And very subtle, yes. The proposal would be that it would be family names, as you see here. Simple family names. We would not allow people to do, in memory of, or Joseph, Annie, Bubba, and Sons. It would just be a family name to keep it very subtle and very classy.
And so that we wouldn't start on this until the fundraising was pretty much completed, is what you're indicating.
Correct. With your direction, we would like to begin the fundraising process as soon as possible. We would hope to have some sort of a dedication of this during the centennial year, although the project would not start or break ground until we have the funds raised. Correct.
Have you given any thought on how long it would take to raise the money?
Well, we haven't given that much thought on how long it would take. Although, again, we would hope to have a ceremonial shovel-in-the-ground ceremony before October 8th, before the end of the centennial. So we have our work cut out for us in the next couple months.
If I can, Marie, what's the
Yes, sir.
estimated construction time for the...
I'm going to pull a Kerwin, and I'm going to say I can't answer that question, and I'm going to ask Ray to step in.
I think it's going to depend on what time of year. I think if it's in the fall and the winter time, it probably could be constructed in a matter of probably, maybe 4 or 5 months.
And will we be importing any of the materials from overseas, or are these all domestic materials?
We haven't really got to the point of selecting where it comes from. We can get granites from the U.S. That's not a problem. It may be more cost-effective to get stuff that's brought in, and that's unfortunate, but it's the way it is. The engraving that would be in the stones would be done locally, but whether the stones are brought in is going to depend on the final selection and construction working with the contractor, I would guess.
Thank you.
Good.
It's interesting that we have a project that has stone that is readily available here, but they're bringing it in from China, and it's less expensive bringing it in from China with the shipping and everything than from our own quarries.
Mr. Mayor, I have another question. I don't know who to ask it to, but on the artwork ball, how are we going to go about getting that designed and select the artist and do all of that? The sphere.
You call spheres or us?
We've talked about several different things to do. I know that Peridian has access to artists, so we've already talked to them preliminarily. We've also even talked about local artists here that we might be able to commission. If we do that, then the Arts Commission can be involved in a selection process. There's a criteria that's established. So there really are some various possibilities of that. Again, since this is just the concept that we've worked on to bring to you, we haven't gotten that far yet on some of those very specific things.
I would add to that, art, you can place any amount of money you want on art, depending on who you go to. And so it would be preferable to find someone local who could do this, that could, maybe contribute part of their design service or whatever as getting recognition for this piece of work. But, if you go out in the world and get famous artists, you could spend as much money as you want. So, but I would guess when we've allocated, the fund that we've allocated is really using someone local and not some world-renowned or nationally renowned artist.
He usually works in concrete and stone.
Pardon?
Travel to Spain or Europe, kind of like the Great Park folks did? Maybe tour around a little?
Yeah.
See some famous, the
Actually,
the plazas in Venice or something?
and it's amazing, even that. You can get, this is going to be an original art piece, we think. But replicas and things, you get beautiful work from China, very reasonable. We just ordered some sculptures from China that the local people were telling us it was $10,000 a piece to do, and we're getting them for $600 delivered. Fine carved stone, real stone. And so the one thing about it is the world has grown smaller.
Okay, I guess that from the councilmanic standpoint, what we're really talking about, as I understand it, is getting a project together, if the council approves on this concept, where we would start a phase one, not necessarily guaranteed that we'd ever go into a phase two, but with the concept that we could go into a phase two at a later date, totally separate, without any commitments. Now, the Centennial group and committee was not committing to anything more than working on the phase one part of the project. They liked the design of phase two.
I guess what Don is speechless. I would certainly encourage that the fundraising commence. If Bernie has volunteered, and Bernie, my hat is off to you if you have volunteered, because you are the consummate fundraiser. There is no doubt about that, especially if you take Ray and Kerwin with you. I think you just have it. I would make one observation for you. Years ago, it's been over 8 now, my wife and I, with some other families, started the Newport Elementary Foundation, and within 3 years, we had raised over $1 million, and we made the front page of the Wall Street Journal because of that. So the people on the peninsula can be generous, and that basically was Peninsula and Lido Isle people. So it's out there. I know it's difficult. I think the timeless and what I think elegant nature of this project will certainly bring quite a few donors. I applaud you for a vision that I think is much needed in our older part of town. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Selich.
Yeah, I'm also in support of that. I think moving ahead with phase one makes a lot of sense. I'm happy we have a phase two plan that if we want to expand it, we've got a design concept laid out that we can go into that area. But the key thing is to get started raising the money and get Phase 1 off the ground and going, so I'm all behind it.
Mr. Kerr?
Mr. Mayor, first of all, I'd also like to commend the Arts Commission for, I think, their excellent leadership and work with the city staff on working up this design and the process that they have followed to involve the community and to think outside the box in terms of developing this concept. Can I ask, do we have a foundation or some vehicle established for fundraising for this, or a 501c3 or some entity to be in charge of the fundraising?
We would go through the same mechanism, the trust fund that we've established for the Centennial. And so we would monitor that in-house. Our staff would take care of that, the recording and the dollars coming in, and track that. And it is a tax-deductible donation.
Great.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any comments?
Good luck with your fundraiser. Let me know if I can help out at all.
I think that you have a pretty unanimous support for Phase 1.
Thank you very much.
And we'll discuss Phase 2 later.
At a date and time to be determined?
Thank you very much, all of you, for the time and effort that you put in so far, and for all that time and effort you're going to be putting in. The third item on our agenda is the proposed City Council policy B-17 Parks, Facilities, and Recreation Programs donations. I believe that, who's the person that's going to handle that, Mark Carmen?
Mark Harmon is going to handle that. Mr. Mayor, it is somewhat unusual that we have a study session item and then also on the same agenda later an action item, but just because of the timing and nature of it, we decided that this was an issue that maybe we could double up on, depending upon how the discussion went at the study session.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mayor Webb, council members. Mark Harmon, Director of General Services. The current G5 policy, which was established in 1992, sets the guidelines for donations related to city park and street improvements. These improvements are primarily bench and tree donations in memory of a family member, a friend, or in recognition of an individual's service to the community. In 2004, staff brought forward revisions to the G5 policy, revisions that were an attempt to better define and hopefully simplify the donation process. In addition to the work that was going on with the G5 in 2004, the Recreation and Senior Services Department developed a policy to regulate donations for recreation programs and facilities. This policy, this draft policy, would have been titled B-17. It starts to sound a little like a bingo game, but that would have been B-17.
Sounds like a bomber to me.
At that time, Mayor Webb, or then Councilmember Webb, directed staff to work with the PB&R Commission to see if we could combine both of these policies and address parks, public improvements, facilities, and recreation programs into one citywide policy. Councilmember Webb also directed staff to address issues concerning donation amounts and plaque requirements. In January 2006, the PB&R Commission appointed a donation committee to address these issues. The challenge of this committee was threefold. First, establish a fair, equitable, and uniform procedure through which gifts may be donated to the city. Second, streamline the donation process for residents, staff, and the PB&R commissioners. And third, create a user-friendly donation catalog that will assist residents in identifying items available for donation to the city. And I will say, as far as staff is concerned, one of the greatest things to come out of this policy revision was that catalog. And I know it's attached to your staff report tonight, but this gives the opportunity for the departments, both General Services and Recreation and Senior Services, the ability to mail this catalog to those people that are interested in making a donation to the city. A lot of visitors to the city see our benches with plaques and see our trees that have been donated, and they get kind of focused or locked into those two items. This catalog lists many things from pet stations to bleachers to on up to a soccer field if that's someone's desire. So This catalog will allow us to outreach a little bit better on available items. Outlined in your report are the additions to the existing policy for both park and street improvements, as well as the recreation programs and facility donations. This combined citywide donation policy is now identified as B17. On April 4th, 2006, the Commission unanimously approved the proposed council policy B17 and directed staff to forward it to City Council for final approval. What staff is asking the council to do at tonight's meeting is approve the proposed City Council policy B17, combining all of the parks, public improvement facilities, and recreation program donations into one citywide policy, and subsequently delete the current City Council policy G5. That concludes my report, and staff would be happy to answer your questions.
Anybody have questions on this item?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Selich?
On the last page of the proposed policy, H3, little I, talk about the donations of 1,000 to less than 4,000 with the 2x6 plaques. Is that consistent with the policy we have now on benches?
No, I believe the current policy does not allow for a reduction in plaque size. It simply states that you have to donate $4,000 or more to get a plaque on that bench. And that was one of the issues that was recommended by Mr. Webb. And the committee looked at that and agreed that having a lower limit, allowing people not to have to come up with $4,000 and still be recognized, was an important asset for those that want to donate. So they agreed with that.
Let me ask it in a different way then. Is what we did in Balboa Island with the plaques that we just put up, which, you know, we went through a lot of hassle, I guess is a way to say, of getting those all done, is that consistent with this policy?
That's consistent with the current policy.
But not this policy?
I'm trying to remember the cost of the donation. I believe...
How much of the wooden benches, I guess, is what the problem is?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if that was over $1,000. I believe it was, which would make it consistent with this policy.
Okay, good, because they wanted to come and ask you to change the policy and discourage you from doing that.
Before I chisel those out, I would rewrite another policy. That's been
Okay.
that's been a lot of work.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Ridgway.
Yeah, I hate to mention this as staff, but I would have liked to have attached current policy B5. I don't know what we're deleting, so I'm a little troubled by approving something when I don't know what I'm deleting.
That's an excellent point, and we should have done that. However, the list of the items in the staff report are what we're adding. We're not deleting things from the G5 policy. We're making additions to.
But the B5 policy is being deleted in totality by the approval of B17.
That's correct.
I can't very well vote on this tonight without having the B5 policy in front of me. I know this is a study session, but I'm now on item 18, and I do not have a copy of the B5 policy. If you want to provide one, I mean, or B5 or G5?
G5.
Okay, I'm sorry, G5. I don't have it in front of me. Obviously, I think it would be important to have a copy of that. How many pages is it?
I believe two at them. Yeah, it's a page and a half, and everything in G5. I know I'm asking
So
for
even if I
little.
move my lips, I can read it during the hearing?
We can get you a
You
copy
could
before
probably
the
have
meeting.
it to where instead of having a closed session, you can read it.
Yeah, we don't, okay, but, okay, would you make a copy? I think it would be important for council, since we're deleting this, to have that as part of item number 18.
Should go quick, it's about a page and a half.
Okay, that's great. Then I'd like to make another comment. I guess I'm a holdover from an older council, and this newer council is heading in a different direction, which I respect. But plaques and naming of things are, when I first got here, we used to talk about sign clutter, plaque clutter. you know? And there's some of that going on here, to be honest with you. I mean, you've lowered the dollar amount given, and everybody gets a plaque. And I certainly appreciate everybody wanting a plaque or a name recognition. I'm not saying, but I just think, you know, I'd like to raise our standards a little bit, and I don't know that this document quite does it. And I think it has, and maybe everybody else is on board, but I just think everything is going to get a plaque. And to me, if somebody wants to give anonymously and not have a plaque, I'm fine with that. But it's the plaque clutter that I'm really addressing here. And so, quite candidly, I do like, let me make a comment, on H3I, I do like a 2x6 plaque, just a comment. They're very small, they're elegant, you can only put very little on there. But, you know, then when we start getting up to these 5x7s, I don't know, and I know the Parks Commission voted on this unanimously, but generally, I think it needs to be reworked to get it a little bit classier to create a standard for the city of Newport Beach that I think is commensurate. This just isn't, you know, I just think throwing up plaques everywhere is on everything that we own is wrong. That's how I feel.
Councilmember Daigle?
Yes, a question for you on H, page 4, looks like B17 in the staff report, H, 3 I's. Can you explain that, where it says individuals can include city employees? I understand that's a departure from the current policy that now people can put a city employee's name that's been here at least 25 years on a plaque that they purchase. How does that work?
That's, let me explain that one, because that's one that I suggested and was put in at my request. I felt that okay, let me back up just a little bit in Mr. Ridgway's statement. I don't think that we have plaque clutter, nor do I feel that we, in this particular policy, that we are going to create that. I guess this is one of the places where the two of us disagree. I think that people would like to have some recognition of people, and I don't think that, in my opinion, that it should always be those that have great amounts of money that can afford large donations that always recognize people. And so that was one of the reasons why you have the $1,000 donation at lower limit rather than starting off at $4,000. I think that if you, in the one that Ms. Daigle is referring to, is one where I think that we ought to have the ability to recognize long-term either city employees or people that have made significant contributions to the city in some manner, some place within the community. Like, for instance, you have an Isabel Pease tree out by Mariners Library, and she was a long-term Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commissioner back in the 60s. Planted a lot of trees in Newport Beach, and she's recognized over there. I think that there are a number of other places, and this is one of the things that this particular policy does, is there's clauses in there that says that they will only be placed in locations that are approved by the staff and to try to get rid of the clutter and grouping. And that if the proposed location is in such a location that creates a problem, it wouldn't be approved. It would go someplace else.
So the staff is kind of the design police?
Yes. Well, and the wording of the plaques ends up being approved ultimately by the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation.
And why 25 years of experience versus 10 or some other number?
It was, I think that I picked that number because it's a long-term employee, somebody that we have quite a few employees of the city, some that have even been there 40 years. But there ought to be a way that we can recognize that much dedication at some time in the future.
I had some additional questions for staff.
Sure.
I had a question for Dennis, the finance director. When I look at the items in the catalog, there's a lot of things that are for sale, and certainly by mailing out to residents, in a sense, we'll be soliciting residents. And it seems as if this is fairly aggressive in trying to generate revenues, and I'm concerned with, as Councilmember Ridgway is, the kind of visual impact this will have in our community. And I had a couple of questions just on our finances, and really, do we need to be as aggressive in seeking revenues? If you were to telephone our bankers and investment advisors today, what would be the balance that the City of Newport Beach has on hand?
Well, good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. That really takes two answers to one question. Citywide, and we're at our high point as we speak in our investments, and I would guess that was probably about $130 million invested in the bank. However, that's all funds combined, including water and wastewater and special revenue funds, et cetera. I think what you're really speaking to is our general fund, and our fund balance as of June 30, 2005, was about $54 million.
Okay. And does the city continue to operate as at a surplus, and in that our revenues exceed our expenditures?
We've been operating on a surplus basis since about 1994, when the last economy downturn and property values were declining, but ever since then, so for at least 12 years now, we've been operating on a surplus.
And thanks to your careful management as well as the city managers. That's wonderful news. When I look also at our facilities, and this touches on kind of the direction of rec services, and we use millions of dollars for community centers, when we rent out these rooms, is the return on those capital dollars significant?
I think that may be a Marie question, but as I recall, that we do try to recover our costs of renting out those facilities.
Operational costs or capital costs?
Capital costs.
Operational costs.
Right.
But not capital costs?
Correct. Okay. That'd be pretty tough to do. And one of my concerns as we move in the direction of trying to raise revenues, we're getting into for example, banquets and wedding receptions, and now we're starting to compete against private businesses, which could also erode our sales tax. So I guess the message that I'm sending is I feel as if some of the ways that we're trying to raise our revenues, I'm not sure we want to move in that direction.
If I could just make a comment, maybe address that a little bit by way of background. The staff was asked by the commission to come back to them with some alternatives to offer the public. What they saw as a trend was folks coming and everyone wanted a bench overlooking the water. And the commission found themselves in the position of having to turn people away or turn down requests. And sometimes they were very heartfelt requests because these benches were in memory of folks that had lived in the community a long time. Or the trees, everybody wants a tree in the same place. So the commission asked not as a way to raise revenue, but as a way to give community members who wanted to make a donation and wanted to make leave a legacy, so to speak, to the community, options and alternatives. This did not come about as a revenue generating program. That was not the intent here. It really was to give people options so that we wouldn't have so much focus on the same area of town for the same amount of benches, and we really have a proliferation of benches. In addition to this, the other thing that Mark's folks have created is a list of our parks and our facilities in town where we do need benches and where we can take donations, so that, again, when we get a request, we can better steer those requests. But it certainly was not the intent to do this program as a way to raise revenue. And this won't be mailed to the public at a whim. It's when someone calls and says, what are the options, then we have this brochure as a resource to show them versus, again, just the standard bench or a tree.
There does seem to be some variety. For example, you can buy a dog bag dispenser for $484.
Mm-hmm. There is a great variety.
I want my name on a dog bag dispenser.
That would be a memorial.
A 2-by-6
I
plaque.
prefer to have it on the dog bags yourself, for you.
If I could add one more thing to Marie's comments, in the past 9 months, General Services has received one request for a donation. So, again, as Marie said, this is not a mass mailing or soliciting of funds. A lot of times people will call us up and say, I would like to do something in honor of a parent or another family member, and this just gives that choice.
Don?
Yes. Mr. Nichols?
I have just one comment, and that is, I think as we do this, particularly trees and benches, what is the, well, first of all, a question, what is the policy with regard to benches in front of people's homes? Is that allowed if it's on public property?
No, we wouldn't go out and put a bench in front of anybody's home. That probably wouldn't fit real well. The way this works, if someone contacts General Services and wants to donate a bench, we now have, and I believe it's 43-page inventory of places in the community where we can put a bench or a tree, it is both, and we will let the people know where these opportunities exist and the style of bench that needs to go in there. So we don't get a park site with 3 or 4 different styles of benches. We will send that inventory list to the people, and they may select from that list. If they don't like any of those places, we would recommend something else in the catalog. We don't haphazardly set trees or benches.
I did run into a problem, I'll pass it on, and that was in Grand Howell Park. Particularly trees were planted across the area where we were trying to have an amphitheater. And, one or two of them had plaques on them. Now, this presents a terrible problem in that you can't see through the trees, so the park is almost useless, and it looks stupid. But on the other hand, if the guy's got a plaque on the tree, you're actually moving a burial stone, so to speak, if you have the tree removed. And so my only comment is I would really like to see these areas that you're going to plant trees and dedicate them, particularly those areas, open to the perusal of the various community associations and areas so that people can make sure that they're not going to be encroaching onto playgrounds, onto amphitheaters in the particular case I had, or some other area.
The HOA, quick answer, any donation in an HOA area requires us to notify the HOA and approval from the HOA.
And I think that you work with Marie's group as far as recreational services are concerned, and in trying to make sure that they're appropriately placed so that programs that are in existence aren't impacted.
That's correct. If I plant something in the middle of her soccer field, I'll hear about it for a long time. So we try and I would be happy to share that inventory with council members, but we do work closely.
It might be a good idea for you to meet with Mr. Nichols and to go through the concerns that he's just raised related to that particular area, and particularly before we get to the Shakespeare in the Park. Mr. Ridgway, you had a comment?
I do. Actually, I think Mr. Nichols is onto something. Most of these donations are going to be on public land. They're not on private land. I will say, on benches on the peninsula, everybody wants to put them at a street end, and the people who live in the houses at those street ends oppose those, quite candidly, because people congregate at those benches. One thing that's in the policy that I like, and that is a 300-foot notice.
That's
okay?
correct.
I think what Mr. Nichols just said just highlights maybe something that should be done, and put in here, and maybe you can be ready for this tonight, a requirement that the nearest, or wherever the HOA where this public park is, or public land, that they be notified, number one, and that the 300 radius be measured from the edge of the public land, in other words, the park, nearest wherever you're going to put a tree.
That's,
That
I'm not sure I
Does that
can
mean you'll be
support
pulling
that,
the item?
because you,
Listen, guys, you know what? You don't live in a community where you're impacted. In my community, I'm impacted by, I mean, one tree shows up because we don't have a lot of trees on the peninsula, as you know. So, and benches are a problem. Again, I love the policy where you do have notification, but what the notification says, remember, we're on public land. So where do you start to measure from? If it's the specific spot, you're putting the public improvement, whether it's a bench or a tree or whatever it is. I mean, arguably, that 300 feet could be all on public land. But, you know, people in the local area may, in fact, use that public land quite a bit. I think Grant Howell Park is a great example where everybody in that community uses it a lot. I just think, you know what? I just think the notification is great. The question is, right now, you know, it's kind of it's ill-defined where that would be. And there's certainly nothing in here about homeowner associations.
Well, you have certain areas within the community that don't have homeowners associations that are active to be there. Most of the homeowners associations are private communities.
Name one. I mean, I got to
Homeowner
tell you.
Association, you got the Newport Coast Association.
That's
All
fine.
of their various different associations are up there. Probably there's 35 of them up there that, so that you're saying that, let's.
The Master Association, you have a Master Association, but there's, I'm going to say in our city, we have either homeowner associations and/or organized groups that care about everything.
There isn't an active one in my neighborhood, for instance.
Mr. Rizzo,
That's because you're there.
are you suggesting that we notify on every tree and bench that's planted, or just the ones with plaques on them?
Actually, just plaques. I'm more worried about plaques more than anything.
So what's the difference to the surrounding neighborhood, whether it's got a plaque on it or it's a bench that doesn't have a plaque on it?
Well, actually, in my neighborhood, benches, even without plaques, are opposed along the boardwalk, period. They just are.
Well, no, I understood you say. I guess I'm having a hard time understanding what the difference is between benches with plaques and without plaques, and why you would notify in an area just because they have a plaque on them.
Well, I guess, let's put it this way. It's just a notification. I won't distinguish between plaque, non-plaque, quite candidly. But if there's a public improvement, again, benches are places where people congregate. On the boardwalk, that's a concern. If you have benches over on public land that are near residential areas, people are going to congregate at that bench.
Councilmember Ridgway, if I could just mention, under 3C of the policy, of the recommended policy, B17, it states bench donations for parks and facilities within a residential community will require notification of residents within 300 feet of placement and an endorsement from a legally established homeowners association. So we would, in fact, have to get the endorsement of the HOA.
I guess that's great. Can you add just notification? Can you post a sign like we do for Planning Commission?
I don't think that's been their
We're getting awfully
policy.
carried away here.
So,
I mean, I guess I'm somewhat concerned with your statement that you would be concerned about people in a public park congregating. That's what a park is for. You're supposed to be able to go there. You're supposed to have a picnic table. You're supposed to have a bench. You're supposed to have a drinking fountain. You're supposed to have a shade shelter. There, that's one of the some of the amenities you put in a park.
but it's those very amenities that are attractive nuisance at nighttime, and that's why we have curfews. So, I mean, you guys...
Are you saying that we should have totally bare parks?
No.
Okay, at least that's good.
I'm saying notification.
And Mr. Mayor, what I'm hearing is that the notification would take place. If 2 or 3 residents were opposed, that would not necessarily kill it,
No.
because we're talking
Right.
about notification.
That's all we're talking about, just notification.
I would say, particularly in Grand Howell Park, Old Corona Del Mar is our area. I have been receiving from the city the blue cards for 25 years. I was never noticed on these trees. Now, what's happened in Corona Del Mar,
Dick, why don't you
I'm
try-
not trying to be, I'm just giving this as an example, Don,
Okay.
and I think it's worthwhile because you may run into it. the ladies wanted to guard the green belt at Fifth Avenue that was donated, and the parking lot there on Marguerite, next to it, there's a green belt. Well, that was planted on about 15-foot centers with trees, so that what the women guarded very carefully so they could see their children get all the way to the elementary school was wiped out over time. And this particular thing, it was very difficult to have a good bowl there for the Shakespeare Festival with trees there. And when it does have a plaque on it, Homer, that is a monument. You know, I don't really like to dig up the dead or the equivalent thereof. And I mean, that's pretty dangerous, you know, when you go affecting somebody else's plaque that they have as a memorial to the dead. So I'm just saying it is something that we should bend over backwards to make sure that these areas where they're going to be put are areas that relatively everybody agrees to. But some of this is important,
Okay.
and it's difficult to remove.
Okay, Mr. Nichols, or Rosansky.
Just kind of a clarification for the city attorney, where it talks about a legally established homeowners association. I'm assuming that's one with CC&Rs and things, because we do have home improvement associations around town that.
Yes, it's always been interpreted to be a homeowners association that operates pursuant to CC&Rs.
And we have lists of those, I assume, at planning or somewhere. Okay.
What about those that have operated for years in zoning areas, like Balboa Island and Corona Del Mar, and some of those?
We do,
Central
but in this
Newport.
case, when you say legally
Peninsula
established, that's
Point.
what it means.
They don't have CC&Rs. Peninsula Point, Central Newport,
Right.
Balboa Island.
What I'm
West
saying
Newport
is if you're
Association.
using the term legally established legally established homeowners association instead of any homeowners association regardless, then if you're going to use the term legally established, it would be with operating under and pursuant to CC&Rs.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Peninsula Point and Central Newport are not legally established pursuant to this
Neither is-
definition.
Yeah, but
One at the
the operative
planning
words is when applicable at the after homeowners association.
Well, it's legally established determines if there's one, and when
The
applicable is
reason,
whether.
it depends upon whether you want to use the term legally established over any affected homeowners association, or even a business district association, if there is one, like one of our bids. Because the reason why we've used legally established homeowners association in the past, within the context of trees, is under the G1 policy, we've given the homeowners associations the abilities to apply for removal of trees within their association. And the idea is that they have CC&Rs that they're subject to, and they have a process where they notify everybody, and when they make a decision to remove a tree, then they've done that on the basis that they've gone through whatever that legally established association's process is. Under this circumstance, you don't need to have that language in there if you don't want to. But I'm just telling you that if you do put the words legally established, that means CC&Rs with a procedure for operating and making decisions.
And then my second question or comment maybe on this is, and it kind of tags onto something that Dick had said, about these plaques and dedications. I mean, it's great when we put them in, but what if we want to remove them? We don't really have any provision in our naming statute. Let's say, we want to redevelop a park or change a street end, and we have to, they've now donated a bench, there's a plaque. I mean, have we made any kind of representation, or maybe we should make an affirmative representation that we have the authority to remove these things, or, that they're not forever, or headstones or monuments, whatever Dick called them.
I think in that particular situation, we would relocate them, either plant a new tree and relocate the plaque
Right.
to a different tree, or relocate the
Well,
event.
but
We
it's
do
not-
state in the policy that we assume ownership at that point in time, maintenance of any donated item, and assumes replacement costs due to vandalism or theft. We could add to that, or, the need to relocate, but we do
should-
assume ownership.
The city does not assume those costs.
Right, we don't assume those costs.
That's what it says.
Does not assume replacement costs, right?
That's
But
right,
we do assume the ownership of it.
No, I understand, but I'd like I personally would just like to make it clear that we have the right to, in our discretion, to remove those improvements if, Robin can draft some
I thought it was
legal
in there.
jubilees.
Wasn't that someplace in the?
In the interest of, I think it was in the interest of public, or the public interest, something like that. I remember seeing.
In here?
Okay, anybody else have anything that they would like to?
Just very quickly, Mr. Mayor. We obviously have some issues we need to focus on with tree location, but I want to commend the staff for the policy and for encouraging citizens to involve themselves in providing public facilities. I think somebody who decides he's going to donate a pinch today decides he just wants to put his name on a library tomorrow, and I think that's something we need to encourage in our community, and I'm glad that we have this program set up to do just that. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I do have one suggestion to make to the City Council as far as a change is concerned. There are two locations in the policy to where it says donations of cash or items valued below $10,000 may be accepted by the appropriate department director. And I think that should be changed to city manager, because we have a policy right now that says the city manager will accept donations and report on a regular basis to the council a listing of those donations, and I think this is a little contrary to
Yeah,
that.
I would agree. I don't know that we want departments just accepting stuff.
That's little double I, 4 double I.
It's B1I and 4.
Wait a minute, B1,
Oh, B1, little I, little one, I guess.
wait. Well, it's also under B4 double I.
Yes, it is. Marie, you
Double
saying
I.
there's 4 locations?
All right, yeah. And can I make a suggestion that under B3, little double I, C, that we remove legally established homeowners? Just the words legally established? Is there any reason we have to keep that in there?
I think you would do that tonight.
Yeah.
Well, this is a consent calendar, I got to pull it.
Okay, maybe it would be best for us to just continue it, and then we'll get the revised document back at the next meeting
I'd say so, too.
with the changes that we have. I don't believe you have an urgency item on this, do you?
I think that's, we would prefer that probably than trying.
But I'm not so keen on removing the legally established language. Sorry.
Well, we could
I
go,
think you're opening
we
it
could
up
bring
to
it
way
back
too
with an
many groups to
analysis.
comment on these things, and it's just...
So we're going to take item 18 off the consent, or we're going to continue it.
And I would suggest the wording that Mr. Ridgway had indicated related under the H4, where they'll be at the expense of the donor and so on and so forth. But I think that you need to have a clause on there that the city can relocate at its discretion without...
Some suggested language would be that the plaques will remain on the donated item for the life of whatever the item is, and that the city would, assuming ownership, would reserve the right to relocate or move the plaque to another location if
A
necessary.
plastic bench has a lifespan of infinity.
It does, but I'm not so
Not
sure
after the
I'm not
skateboard.
so sure how long that little doggy bag thing lasts.
Not after the skateboard.
Or the shade shelter, or some of the other things maybe over time might need to be replaced, and so then they would at least last for that period of time.
Okay,
Seen my doggy?
let's, does anybody else have any other comments before we go on to item 4? Okay, item 4, amendment to the city council policy F14 service contracts.
Mark, you thought that was going to be easy, didn't you?
I thought so. But I'm new, so...
Welcome to Newport Beach. Mr. Manager, are you handling this one, or is this City Attorney's Blossom? You're going to stand and
This
speak
is
to
mine.
us?
I'm going to have to stand because we actually have a PowerPoint. I don't want to be outdone by Dave Kiff. So, and we brought copies for everybody if you want to
Just pull the microphone down so we can hear you,
along.
please.
Can you hear me? We didn't think it'd be that easy, so we didn't put this on tonight's agenda, so have at it after we're done. Over the last 5 or 6 years, the city you may not realize it, but the city processes hundreds of contracts every year, and they seem to be increasing as staff gets busier and we do more and more projects. And it became really apparent over the last few years and the time that we've been spending trying to deal with contracts and the different issues raised by all the contractors and the staff members over who had authority to do what, that we needed to look at the basis for our authority and the state law and update our council policies. We had them kind of spread out in some different places, and we'll go over that later. So I assigned Kathy Wolcott, who's a part-time contract attorney in our office, and I gave her this assignment. I said, you can't work on anything else but this until we get it done. So she's been working pretty hard on it over the last months. She has researched all the legal issues, looked in every nook and cranny under Alchemy and with the clerk's office to make sure that we had every resolution that dealt with this, every council policy that dealt with it, and looked at each department, met with each department, found out how they process contracts, what their issues were, and where there were holes in the system, where there wasn't direction, where they weren't following direction, and came up with this policy. So we're going to make an attempt and try and go over what we're proposing to do for the council tonight, and the overall goal was to update, make our contracting procedures legal, and then consolidate them so that staff and contractors and anybody else would have one policy to go to for direction. So the purpose of the proposal would be to take everything that we have, and we'll go over that, and put it into a new council policy, F14. And it would be to enable the city council to delegate to designated city officers the authority to enter into some contracts, and that's consistent with past practice, and giving procedural guidance to city staff on the policy and how the council expects staff to process contracts. The basis for the authority came about as a recollection, as the council might recollect, from a realization that we have a charter section that makes it very clear that no contract, the city isn't bound by any contract unless the mayor and the city clerk signs it. But there is a provision in the charter that authorizes the council to designate other officers as necessary for approving contracts. And it actually also authorizes the council by resolution or ordinance to authorize the city manager to bind the city. So working from that provision, we came up with F14, which, as we get comments back from you on this policy, we'll bring it back in the form of a resolution to be adopted by the council. It would be probably, I think, the only policy that the council would adopt by resolution. This gives you a little bit of an outline of the different policies. There's one other policy that also deals with contracting, which we'll have to work, we'll come back to the council with, but this was you'll see that there was a charter, and then the last amended resolution was in 1987 by the council, which gave the city manager authority, and then we discovered that F14 had authority for department heads within their budget authority to enter into contracts for $30,000, which is the same amount of the city manager was previously authorized to sign for. The proposal in this new F14 would be to look at the fact that over the last 15, 20 years, there's been amendments to the city manager's authority starting at $5,000 originally, going to $30,000 in '87, and now we're proposing, just with the cost of services and the cost of processing contracts, to raise the city manager's authority to $50,000. But retaining the $30,000 authority for the department heads. So that way the city manager has a little bit more control and knowledge over those contracts that might go a little higher without having to come to the council for processing every contract.
Robin, one question. Wasn't the $30,000 created through a vote of the people? Wasn't?
Yeah, that was for public works.
Just public
There's a
works,
public works contracts limit on contracts that are supposed to be that qualifies a public works. So contracts over $30,000 have to be let to the lowest responsible bidder.
Well, no, I mean, the 30,000 figure, as my understanding was, it used to be 5,000, and then I thought it took a vote to amend the charter to raise it to 30,000 from 5,000.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
still for Public Works. So the original 5,000 was by resolution. It was, what was the resolution? 7072. So it was an old resolution.
Kathy just mentioned Resolution 11, or Charter Amendment 1110. Is that incorporated into your study here, by the way? Okay, and then the other question is, if we're going to go by a resolution for a change to F14, I hazard a guess that you'll name it something else other than F14.
We weren't planning on it.
Okay.
The interesting thing is the original F14, was it F14? No, I think it was the original Newport Beach City Council resolution. It said that the amounts shouldn't change except for by resolution. And I'm also recommending that we do it by resolution because the charter gives the council authority to delegate that by ordinance or resolution. The reason why I'm not suggesting that we do it by ordinance and rather by resolution and then make it in a policy is that way people know where to go because they know where the policies are. And policies are generally considered direction to staff. They're not considered a law that is enforceable against the general public. They're more the council's direction on how we proceed.
Resolution 8767 also specified that F14 would be adopted by resolution and that all future changes to F14 would be adopted by resolution. That got lost somewhere.
In anticipation of your presentation, and also there's an item on our agenda this evening, S30, that pertains to grants. I pulled a copy of the F14 on our website, as all of our policies are. What, if anything, are you proposing in terms of grants? Currently, the city manager can accept a grant up to $30,000. Are you proposing that that be changed to $50,000?
I don't think this policy deals with grants at this point in time. So if you'd like us to look at including that in this policy, but because grants are different than contracting, in a way they are a form of contracting because usually when you get a grant, you have that a lot of times the grants require us to come to the council to have the council approve the resolution. So this is more intended to be a process for staff and when they have authority to approve something. And so we can look at the grant applications and see if it would make sense to put it in here, but I think we considered it a separate process.
Okay. Because one of the concerns with the grants, and I understand that a requirement of many grants is that the city council, that they adopt a city council resolution, is that the obligations of some of those grants can go way beyond the actual cash match that we do. It can result in employees over a long period of time. It can also result in a policy direction of the city. And within individual departments, people can start to be writing a lot of grants. And I know one employee that I had spoken to said that they were working a lot of overtime, but it was on a grant. So I know at some point I'd like to get into maybe the grants that we currently have and what our obligations are with those grants and moving forward, what it is so that the council has a clear picture that we're obligating ourselves into in terms of employees and policy direction.
Would it make sense, though, if we looked at that as a separate item rather than bringing it into this?
Maybe. I think you're right.
Okay. But I agree. It would be good to come back to the council with our grant processing. We generally now we just bring grants to the council and have them approve them, and they get that information at the time. But maybe we can improve that process so that the council has a better understanding of what the obligations are when we agree to accept a grant.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go back. So the intent is that this new policy would apply to these types of various contracts. It specifically is not intended to apply to purchase orders just for goods. That would continue to be handled by F5. This is mostly an update of the prior resolution by authorizing or increasing the amount of giving the city manager approval to $50,000. Also clarifying that the city manager has authority for any amendments up to 125% of the amount of whatever the contract was, not just automatically to go above $50,000, but whatever the contract amount, the city manager would be able to go up to 125% of that. And in some situations, if up to 150%, and we'll go into what that situation is. It's mostly in emergency situations. And then the other thing that has come up is over time, we have these contracts that we do for environmental documents or for planning documents, and the city doesn't actually pay for them, but we enter into the contract because we're required to process the environmental document. And there's a timing with getting the environmental document ready. And so what we're suggesting here is to give the city manager the authority to sign for those kinds of contracts when the applicant is actually paying the fee, up to $100,000. And the reason why we picked that amount was there are cases where a project is so big, and I think you just had one before you where the contract was for $140,000, because it becomes a complex project, and it gives the council a little bit of a heads up of a big project that's coming down. So that's why we thought that for $100,000 or more or less, it's a less complicated project, and it gives us the ability to get started on the environmental document without having to come to get approval from the council. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's a suggestion that came out of a planning department.
And I would just add to bullet points 1 and 2, because it's ambiguous the way it's written, and I'd add the language, whichever is greater.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So the 125% could be greater than 50,000. Probably won't be, but could be.
Well, this is just a bullet point to kind of give you a heads up on what we will be doing in the future, but we'll make sure that it's clear in the policy itself.
Robin, on number 4, outside of giving the council a heads up on bigger projects, is there any reason to limit the dollar amount of those environmental service contracts?
No, I don't. Not if the council would want to give authority for whatever the cost of the environmental document is that's being paid for, because the city, it's not anything coming out of the city's budgeted funds that we require the applicants to pay that money up front to pay for it.
Yeah, I think I'd prefer to see just to give the city manager the authority to execute the contract, and maybe just you give the council a notification that it's going on and just let them go ahead and notify. It just seems to me to be an unnecessary step in the process. It just slows things down.
Even if it's a $500,000 project or $1 million project?
The contract?
Yes.
Well, you're not going to, I mean, an EIR today is typically what, they're $250, something like that, maybe $300 at the most. I mean, you're not going to get $1 million EIR. I mean, the applicant is paying for it.
Yep.
I mean, and it's their responsibility. I think as long as the council's notified, why go through that extra step? It just takes more time, and a lot of times it's costly to the applicant.
Yeah, there really isn't a decision for the city council to make. I mean, what are you going to say? You're not going to do it?
Robin, Don reminded me on those bullet points where I said whichever is greater, I think your intent is to not let it be greater than $50,000. Anyhow, it's ambiguous in those bullet points, the way it's written.
Well, it would be greater than, if it's 125% of 50,000, so it wouldn't be greater than that. Of whatever the amount of the contract is,
Yeah.
up to 50,000.
Yeah, up to, I think your intent was up to 50, no greater than 50,000.
No, if
really?
the city manager had entered into a contract for 48,000 or 49,900, it'd be 125% of that. If he entered into the contract and it was 30,000, then it'd be 125% of that. So he can't, I think what you're trying to clarify is that we don't want, the suggestion is if he enters into a contract for 30,000, then he can only go up to 125% of that. That was our intent.
Right.
If thinking that he doesn't have the authority to then go up to 50,000,
If he has,
or plus 125 of that.
but if he enters into a contract that's $50,000,
Right.
then he wouldn't be able to do anything because.
No, he'd be able to go up to 125% of that.
To 62.5.
This
Because
issue's
right
coming.
now, I mean, that provision is based on 30,000, isn't it?
Well, right now, it's not clear.
No, and okay, but that's not what that says, so it needs work, that's all.
We had to make it somewhat smaller to not put up an eye chart on the wall for you. So some of the details are not in the bullet points.
Yeah.
However, the reason that the 125% number came up is because we get frequent questions in our office during contract review over what do we do about a $30,000 contract? What do you do about the $29,999 contract that is now getting amended to $31,000 because of a couple items that have come up? Does council care? Does council want to spend the time reviewing this because it's now gone over 30? If you do want to, please let us know and we can adjust the wording.
As one council member, no, I don't.
I have a question. Why, if the city manager would have the authority to go up to $50,000 anyway, why would we care if it was a $25,000 contract and now he says it's got to be 45? I would say I would go with the language actually that you propose and say
Whichever is greater?
whichever is greater, 50%, $50,000 or 125%, whichever is greater. I would support that.
So then if
So if it was a $24,000 contract and it went up 25%, that would say 30,000. But let's say they needed to go to 40.
Okay.
That would be okay because he could have approved that.
But the overall limit is 50,000 up to 6,250 if he went up to a 50,000. It'd only be- Okay, that's fine.
Whichever is greater.
Actually
If the rest of the council wants,
to work with that.
agrees with that, that would be great. Okay. We'll make that adjustment.
Robin, would this step, in other words, if a department head was doing 30,000 and he went over, then Homer could have proved that, right?
Yes, we're getting to that next.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
Oh, does anybody have any thoughts on eliminating that and just giving him the authority to sign any contracts that are paid for by permit applicants through the planning department?
That's great.
And I'd be glad to include that in the newsletter and make sure that you knew when contracts were signed, if that's something you're interested in.
I think it's good to know.
Okay, what we could do is we could say the city manager shall provide notification to the city council when contracts are entered into. Be a way of a heads up of knowing that a project's coming through.
I kind of would lean towards contracts over 100,000 having the city manager sign it.
There's, one of the reasons why we suggested this just for the environmental documents was because of the timing of getting started on it. There's other departments that enter into contracts that are paid for by the applicants, like for traffic studies. The building department sometimes will enter into contracts for services, for building inspection. The Public Works Department enters into contracts for inspectors on, maybe on a project. So the next question is whether the council would like us to include that for any type of contract, giving authority to the city manager to sign for any type of contract where the fees are paid for by the applicant. I specifically, for this policy, limited it just to the environmental documents because there's more of a timing issue on that, and we have to get started on it. But
Can you give us a couple of examples of those types of contracts?
well, for instance, any kind of a contract that needs a environmental document usually will need a traffic study with it. And so the applicant pays the fees for the contractor.
Well, here, I have a question. Do you or Homer or Sharon or any of you ever recall us not approving one of those things?
Nope.
For any reason?
Nope.
Okay, then I say lump them all together.
Okay.
Who currently signs those, the city manager or the department director?
Well, if it's more than 30,000, we send it to the council for signature because they get approved.
Okay, but under the new system, let's say it's a traffic consulting.
The proposal would be the city manager.
Okay, great.
For clarification, do you want to keep the $100,000 cap on that, or?
No, they don't want it. They don't want the $100,000 cap. So, because we just be providing notice. The city manager would be providing notice. Okay.
So this would be authority for the department heads to sign, keeping with the 30,000 that they now have, but allowing for the contract to be amended and the department director to actually sign that amendment as long as it doesn't exceed 125%, whichever amount is greater.
See, I would prefer to have the city manager have the signing authority, or at the very least that he have some notification that these contracts are going on.
Yeah, and those...
This is the way we have done it, and I understand that. Let me go a little bit through the process. The reason why, mostly the department director, when they are a project, if at this amount of money, these are small items, small contracts that the department director is authorized to sign for. And it's specifically stated that it has to be within their budget authority. So in other words, it has to be something that the department has already had authorization within their budget to pay for, to buy it. So it becomes, and you know, it's kind of up to the city manager, but there's a lot of contracts that department heads enter into for their day-to-day operations within their budgetary amount, and it's difficult to, I mean, usually department heads go to the city manager when they're entering something that's questionable, but if they've got the budgetary authority to enter into a contract for services, whether it's, I don't know, nobody's really here. Mark's not here anymore. Kathy, maybe you can kind of give me some examples, because Kathy met with each of the departments.
Steve does stuff like that.
Maybe it's weed abatement or something like that for a particular site.
Or let's say we need to do a quick traffic study to find out about traffic safety around a school for $5,000 or something. So those are the kinds of things we want to be able to execute quickly.
Yeah, software maintenance, Dick was just giving me. There's daily operational issues that the department heads have always had the authority to sign for. The only time that they would need to go to the city manager would be as if they'd like to have a contract entered into up to $50,000, and then they'd be going to the city manager for that.
I guess the thing that's missing from your PowerPoint is it doesn't say within the budgetary constraints.
Well,
That was
that's
there
within
originally.
That was in the policy. We're trying to
Okay. All right, I
go over
understand.
the highlights for you of the
But
policy without going into all the detail.
I think the key element here is that it has to be in the budget for them to
Correct.
contract for it. They can't just go
And
out
that's being continued.
and buy a new car that's not in the budget.
Yes.
Robin, just a question. If it was something that the contractor were paying for, we're giving that a different limit? I think we should, there's some liability on our part when we approve these contracts, is there not? I mean, if we approve a $100,000 traffic contract on an ongoing EIR, and we just drop it, I mean, the council says we no longer want to consider that project, the applicant would have some comeback that, look, you asked me to go ahead with this traffic, you had no intention of passing the thing in the first place, I'd like my money back.
Dick, I don't think that is a situation that would occur, because a part of the process in getting a project to the city council would be to go through CEQA. Some projects require EIRs, so that would be required of you to even consider the project. And there isn't any obligation on the part of the city council if some kind of authority and decision is needed by the city council to approve it. There isn't any guarantee that that EIR is going to be of any value.
No, I don't really mean that, but in the same way you track the other ones, Homer, it might be wise to have a single-person track. We have, in the school district particularly, we had a large embezzlement some years ago, and it occurred here in our facility, too, at one time. And if there is a little bit of oversight there, like you said, you just take a look at the contracts and you basically flag somebody else that, you know, these are going on if they're over a certain amount. That, it does at least inhibit things a little more if that were to ever occur or could occur.
I think I misunderstood your original question.
Mine was that the type of expenditure, whether it's a company for the company's own product, I don't see that should affect the top limit of the authorization of a person, is what I'm saying. In other words, if I'm putting through an EIR, even if I'm the hospital, and I run a $50,000 or $60,000 traffic study corresponding to my $150,000, EIR, I think that should be flagged to you. It's over 50 grand, and it's just a contract that came in. It would be nothing more than cross your desk, but it would be on your list that you would be aware of it and might be passed on even.
And that, under that kind of situation, this policy would take care of that. I would have to sign that rather than a department head, and you would get notification.
And that
our
sounds
contracts-
fine.
Yes,
That's
and
what I
our
just wondered.
contracts specifically provide within them cancellation of a contract and how you handle
No,
that.
my only question was, Robin, whether there was a different limit on that type of contract than there was on another.
Yes. That, the direction that right now I'm hearing is that there is no limit on the contracts that are being paid for by the outside, by the applicant.
I think there is some reason to do that. It's just a practice situation.
I think, though, that the
I'm
rest of
sorry.
the council hasn't supported that.
Yeah. There's one other item in here that I've put in that has never been handled by any policy, and we didn't get this summarized in here, but there's apparently been a long-standing history, and my predecessor told me that even before him, that when contracts for outside legal counsel are entered into as it relates to litigation, relates to legal issues regarding the city and the city attorney's duties, and as long as it's within the city attorney's budget authority, that the city attorney has always made those decisions in hiring the best outside counsel. And so I've made it clear in there that that the city attorney has the authority to enter into contracts with no limit on it. But of course, knowing who the city attorney answers to, we're going to let the council know when we're going to be undertaking a significant case with maybe significant expenditures with outside counsel or experts. So that's been provided now in the policy because I couldn't find anywhere else that had ever been handled.
And Robin, I take it that that is a budgeted item too, as far as
It would also have to be
professional
within the city attorney's budget that's approved by the council every year. And generally, the council is going to know about the bigger contracts that are entered into, because if it's significant litigation or significant exposure, you're going to hear about it in closed session through that concept. But this is a way of giving the city attorney the ability within its budget authority to go out and look for the best attorneys, depending upon the issue that's before the city.
And Robin, we're going to get into the discussion about process for competitive procurement and all of that. Do those same rules that would apply to the city manager, for example, in seeking competitive proposals and all of that, also apply both to department heads and to the city attorney in these contracts?
It would, to the extent that it's the type of services that you would competitively bid. And even for legal services, it's also a good idea when you know there's 2 or 3 law firms that maybe have the capability of doing the work that you need for them, and asking them to give you a proposal and tell you how much they would charge for that and how they would handle it so that you get the most cost-effective services. And we do that now anyway, which is item 4. A while back, I know there was a request from the council to deal with procurement, or how we handle hiring contractors or finding outside consultants to do services. So we took that, and Kathy also worked with Sharon Wood on incorporating that as well into this policy. So it's another item that hasn't really been handled anywhere else in any other policies that's now put into place and proposed in this policy itself. And so these are the processes for that, and I'm going to go ahead and ask Kathy to go through that, because I'm not as familiar with what she came up with, both working with Sharon Wood and the various department heads. She didn't talk with you about it, Sharon? I'm sorry.
No, I pooped out.
You did not poop out. You directed us all. Some of the procedures that the new council policy F14 incorporates are clarifying that all contracts for service need to be attested to by the city clerk. There is currently no requirement anywhere that she attest to anything other than those that are signed by the mayor, approved by the council. And we wanted to clarify that because the charter does impose a duty on her to keep a running list of all the contracts that we're in, and if she can't see them, she does not have the opportunity to form that list. So we want to make sure that she can do that. We are also clarifying that all contracts for services will be reviewed and approved by the city attorney's office, and that includes all contract documents, which means the scopes of services, any attached exhibits.
You know, in connection with that, because I don't ever, or at least I don't often see it on our contracts, or the ones that I come across, that we have a signature block for that, or, you know, at least approved as to form and content by the city attorney.
We do have that on most of the ones we review.
I don't see it on all of them, I don't think.
It ought to be.
What happens is that the city-generated forms do, and often what will happen, and this is one of the things that we're trying to get a track on with these procedures, is that a non-city-generated form will come in, and it won't have that on there, and it'll get processed, and we have a stamp in the office to put it on that contract, but we end up having to review it. So once we get this policy in place, our goal is to have city-generated contracts within a local location so that all staff members that need to process a contract can go and get a contract from a single source and be required to use that form, so it makes it easier for us to review them and approve them. But this is another area that's not clear, and we want to make it clear to everybody, is that the city attorney has to approve all contracts and sign off as to form before they get approved.
Okay, so even the ones that are not generated in the city, if we do wind up using those, we will in the future ensure that they do.
Correct.
Thank you.
Because we don't like finding conflicts between what our policy is and what goes through, and also between what is in the attachments and what's the wording in the contract itself. Another clarification is that we want the contracts for services to be accompanied by proof of the appropriate level of insurance already in place before execution, so that we can be absolutely sure that it's in place before the contract begins, before the project begins. And as it says in current Council Policy 14, we reiterated in the revised version, not all services are appropriate to be let out for bids. Professional services, for example, it's by law supposed to be qualification-based selection. You can consider fair and reasonable price, and we want to, but we are encouraging that bids be acquired whenever possible. Which brings us to the professional services consultant selection process project. We had a committee on this. Professional services procedures shall be followed to retain the most qualified consultants at a fair and reasonable cost. The procedures vary based on the size of the project. The actual wording in the council policy is a lot more detailed than this, and it is broken. Lois Thompson in Fiscal Services did it, and she did a very detailed job, as she always does. And it breaks the projects down into large, intermediate, and small. And the basic procedures are about the same. There's more procedural steps you need to take for the large projects. Generally, it is soliciting qualifications, sending out a request for qualification regularly to groups of consultants that we may be interested in working with. Having, for large projects, have a review committee to review those qualifications. Smaller projects, the qualifications can be reviewed by the department director. After you've reviewed the qualifications, you have now a running list of all of the qualified consultants you can pull from. And when a project comes up, we send out requests for proposals from 3 to 5 consultants, depending on the size of the projects, whenever possible. Sometimes that is not going to be possible, and we've left wording in to give a little bit of flexibility there. The council will be notified when there will be less than 3 who are going to be solicited for proposals. Let's see. Then after that, they will select the most qualified firm and approach and negotiate an appropriate not to exceed cost amount. One of the things that we have not found a lot of guidance on is what to do in the case of an emergency. And emergencies tend to occur at awkward times. They don't always allow us to come before council. I'm not sure you want to be called at 2 a.m. to ask to declare an emergency. So we looked at the available authority. The first authority for contracting still comes from City Charter 421. There is also authority from the Municipal Code and from City Charter Section 1110. The Municipal Code deals more with a level of emergency that would be a local or regional disaster or extreme peril. The portion in the Public Works section of the City Charter deals more with urgent necessity for, urgent necessity for preservation of life, health, property. So if a water main breaks at 2 a.m. and you've got a sinkhole forming on Irvine Avenue, that would be considered city charter type emergency we're dealing with. So we did try to codify that, or not codify, excuse me, we did try to put that into Council Policy F14 to give some guidance to staff when these situations come up and they need to enter a contract. About emergency one, the 2 levels of emergency. In the first emergency situation, which is the conditions of local emergency, disaster, or peril, the contracting authority is exercised by the director or the assistant director of emergency services, and that person or persons are authorized to bind the city, written or verbally, to pay for necessary equipment and supplies and services at fair market value.
Right now, that's the city manager and the fire chief. The fire chief would be the assistant.
Assistant? Okay. Level 2 emergency. Sudden unexpected occurrence creating a clear and imminent danger requiring immediate action to prevent damage to life, health, and property. The city manager or department director can enter the contract, and by approving Council F14, you're giving them the authority to enter one and then to bring the contract to the City Council at the next scheduled meeting for your review. And our final slide is that to avoid confusion and to take care of locking in the emergency rates to the extent we can in advance, we are encouraging all departments to enter emergency on-call agreements with as many consultants as possible so that we have a contractual relationship with service providers before the need arises and so that we have the emergency rates locked in advance to the extent we can. Thank you. So if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. I applaud you for taking a step ahead of the General Services Department. They had a B-17 bomber, you have an F-14 jet.
We're faster.
That's it.
Oh, no, you get another one tonight. Does the council have any questions or comments they'd like to make?
I don't have any questions other than Robin knows, and as mayor twice and signing lots of contracts, I had numerous conversations with the previous city attorney, and I applaud you for moving forward with this project. It's long overdue, quite candidly. It should have been done years ago, but it's well done. Well done. I think bring it back as a policy, as a resolution for a policy, and I think you'll. And your presentation was very good. I mean, to the point where it could have been not understood, but it was very straightforward and understood.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I agree with that. Anybody else wish to comment on this particular item? It's 6 o'clock.
We did it.
Call for public comments.
Public comments. Come on, Patty and Dennis. Comment. Say something. Okay. We'll adjourn to the next meeting, which will start at 7.